regularly scheduled meeting of the Silicon Valley Clean Energy Authority Board of Directors on Wednesday, September 14th, 2022 at 7 p.m. And for those wishing to teleconference in, they can use the https://city-of cupertino.zoom.us/I think that's an I, is that a J? A J/93815130659, or telephone for audio only at 1-669-900-6833. In accordance with the California Government Code 54953E, in consideration of the coronavirus, members of the Silicon Valley Clean Energy Board of Directors and staff have the option to participate in this meeting by teleconference. Members of the public may also attend the meeting as previously indicated. The public will have an opportunity to provide comment during the meeting. Members of the public participating remotely and using Zoom may comment during public comment or the applicable agenda item by using the raised hand feature, and you will be recognized by the chair. Those using the telephone audio only feature should press *9 on your phones to initiate the raised hand function in Zoom. You will then be announced unmuted and your time to speak will begin. The public may provide comments on any matter listed on the agenda. Speakers are customarily limited to 3 minutes each. However, the board chair may increase or decrease time allotted to each speaker based on the number of speakers, the length of the agenda, and the complexity of the subject matter. Speaking time will not be decreased to less than 1 minute. And may we have a roll call, please?
Yes, thank you.
Chair Gibbons?
Here.
No, Chair Gibbons, I'm sorry, this is Tricia Ortiz, your General Counsel. I was going to recommend that you report out from closed session, a special meeting, and then convene the regular meeting.
Thank you for that. So reporting out from the special meeting, there is nothing to report out at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll proceed with roll call. I'll start with you, Chair Gibbons.
Here.
Vice Chair Tyson.
Here.
Director Larson.
Here.
Director Willie.
Here.
Director Flagger.
Here.
Rennie.
Here.
Chua.
Here.
Elahi.
Present.
Martinez Beltran.
Here.
Abe Koga.
Here.
Walia.
Here.
Lee.
Here.
Thank you. And I will note that Director Hilton is absent this evening, and we do have a quorum.
Thank you very much, and welcome everyone. This is the opportunity for the public to speak on a matter not on the agenda this evening. The public may speak and provide comments. Is there anyone wishing to speak on an item not on the agenda this evening? I do not see any raised hands. We will then...
And Chair Gibbons?
Yes.
I'm seeing you on 2 different screens, and one of the screens, depending on how you're holding up your paper, it actually blocks you. Just wanted to make you aware of that.
Thank you very much. I love to be double screened and blocked. All right, let's try this one. Thank you. So for this evening's calendar, we will begin with the consent calendar, and that will be preceded by any comments from the public on the consent calendar. And we will begin with a comment from our General Counsel, Tricia Ortiz, to provide a statement on item 1D, approval of amendment number 5 to the employment agreement for the Chief Executive Officer.
Thank you, Chair. The consent calendar includes the approval of the amendment to the CEO employment contract, as you mentioned. And as required under the Brown Act, I'm going to briefly orally report a summary of that amendment. It increases the annual salary from $384,000 to $422,400. It allows the CEO to elect to receive an additional $1,000 per month in lieu of participating in the group medical insurance plan as additional compensation, and it provides an additional 80 hours of management leave time to be used before September 30th, 2023.
Thank you very much. And with that, if there's no comments from the public or the board, I would accept a motion to approve consent calendar items 1A through 1Q.
So move with the amendment as stated by Attorney Ortiz.
Thank you.
Second.
I saw that by motion made by Director Chua. The second was by,
Martinez Beltran.
thank you. And with that, may we have a roll call, please?
Thank you. Chair Gibbons,
Aye.
Vice Chair Tyson,
Yes.
Director Larson,
Yes.
Willie,
Yes.
Flagger,
Yes.
Rennie,
Aye.
Chua,
Aye.
Elahi,
Aye.
Martinez Beltran,
Aye.
Abe Koga,
Aye.
Walia,
Aye.
Lee.
Lee, yes.
Thank you. That motion carries unanimously with Director Hilton absent.
Thank you, board and staff, for all the work that list of consent items reflects. And now we will move to the regular calendar. Along with the CEO report, we have several important updates, and most significantly, recommended operating budget and an updated reserves policy for our next fiscal year. So thank you. And the CEO, Balachandran, please.
Thank you, Chair Gibbons. I have several things to update you on in my report. First, I'd like to have two of the latest, most recent team members at SVC introduce themselves. They're both climate fellows. And I'm going to start with Juliet Pascal. Juliet, please introduce yourself. Juliet, you're muted.
Juliet, you're muted.
Sorry about that. I am Juliet Pascal. It's nice to meet everyone. I just recently joined as the new Community Outreach Fellow. So I'll be working on the short film competition and the education fund, DIY toolkit that's available for residents, as well as any other event, community outreach programming that we have. A little bit of background for me. I graduated from Berkeley in 2019 with a degree in conservation and a minor in creative writing. And this opportunity at SVC is really exciting for me. I've been involved in kind of a number of environmental activities, and this was really a perfect kind of confluence of my interests. I was in the Peace Corps as an education volunteer. I worked with the University of Michigan for a while on green stormwater infrastructure, as well as an internship with the Great Lakes Commission, and being able to work with a public agency like SVCE, kind of at this time in our consciousness of climate action and the exciting moment for clean energy. This just is an opportunity that I'm really grateful for. So thank you to SVCE for having me. Really excited to be here. And just a little bit more background, fun stuff about me. I love to backpack. I was actually working with a different nonprofit also, working with Cal State Parks and being part of a backcountry trail operations crew that would just do a lot of backpacking and working in all the different California state parks. So I'm here in San Jose right now, very close to Santa Cruz, which is near and dear in my heart. And yeah, that is a little bit about me. So I will hand it over to the next fellow.
Okay. Well, we'll just say welcome, Juliet. One of the great strengths of Silicon Valley Clean Energy for many years has been our internship program and the background that the interns bring. And I will say the freshness of your experiences always contributes significantly. So thank you and welcome. Okay.
Next up is Alhad Dike, and he's not a stranger to our community, but he'll introduce himself to the board.
Great. Thank you, Girish. Good evening, members of the board. My name is Alhad Dike. I will be the Fleet Electrification Fellow working on Silicon Valley Clean Energy's fleet electrification efforts. A bit of a background about me. I graduated from UC Santa Cruz in 2019 with a degree in Environmental Studies, Biology, and a minor in Sustainability Studies. Shortly after that, I worked in the climate tech space, working at a startup in the environmental supply chain transparency field. After doing that for about 2 years, I was actually a Civic Spark Fellow before this in the past year. I was at the Bay Area Regional Collaborative, where I worked with a very small team on climate adaptation efforts, primarily sea level rise adaptation, and a few decarbonization efforts. And this has now led me to this fellowship position at Silicon Valley Clean Energy, where I'm very excited to be working on electrification and within the energy space. I think Juliet said it really well. This consciousness of action that we have right now at the federal and local level is, it's building up this momentum, and I'm very excited and honored to take part and aid in these efforts. I think Girish also mentioned I've been a Cupertino resident outside of my time from Santa Cruz for the last 12 years or so. So I'm very excited at the prospect of being able to give back to the community I've made home for the last decade and more. So thank you, and I really look forward to working with everyone here.
Well, obviously, we're delighted that you're with us, and with that experience and enthusiasm, and the timing couldn't be better for your interest in what you're going to contribute to us. And those of us that don't live in Camp Cupertino and represent other cities, it's okay, you can mention Cupertino, but not too often. Thank you very much, and welcome.
Thank you, Chair. Go on. Exciting programs that you approved in June. This is the Community Decarbonization Demonstration Grant Program and the Decarbonization Engagement Grant. You've allocated $1.2 million and $350,000 respectively. And the demonstration grant is for the community facilities that can demonstrate electrification and what we are doing, carbon-free electrification kind of proof of concepts that people can come in and actually visit and see what we're talking about. For example, the city of Montecito is upgrading one of their buildings, and they have plans on how to electrify that. They could apply, for example, for one of these grants. So this grant program is opening this month, and Tony Yulo is leading that effort. So if there's any follow-up you need, and we will, of course, be reaching out to all of you to make sure that you have that information. Next item to update you is prepay. The board will recollect that we entered into a prepay agreement where we would prepay using tax-exempt financing. Several of our power contracts, which resulted in close to a $2 million per year savings. We did that for about 10% of our portfolio. And when we provided that to you, we said we'll be coming back with more of our portfolio being folded into these prepay programs. So Amrit Singh is leading up the next iteration of this. We're using the same set of professionals that we used in the last prepay, except for one legal firm for some conflict reason. So he'll be reaching out to the finance committee to have them up to date with this, get their input, and then we'll be bringing it back to the board. We expect to get this done by the end of the year, and the potential savings are quite a bit more than what we had last time. So we're really looking forward to that. The next item is to keep you updated on an event for elected officials on September 29th. It's our Electrification Reach Code event. We've sent you all emails on that. We've got several signups. I just wanted to make sure that you know about it, and we will continue to update you on this. It's a joint effort of Silicon Valley Clean Energy and Peninsula Clean Energy. similar to an effort we did the last time we did breach codes, but this one's going to be virtual, September 29th, 7 to 8 p.m. And that information will be provided to you after this meeting too, as part of our recap. The last item I'd like to mention, and we probably have much more discussion on it in the weeks and months to come, is to report on the heat storm from last week. In terms of intensity, the temperatures, and combined with duration, we've not had something like this. So it's a combination of multiple heat days and having the duration over a long period of time. It was a 9-day heat storm, and we got through it. The state got through it in the sense that no rolling blackouts were called, but we came very close. And there were several reasons as to why, including, natural gas during those hours when solar is not available contributes more than 60% of the power that we have in California. The outage rate for gas units was quite low. So even though we had historic high loads that we've never seen in California before, the units were available. Imports, power that we imported from other states, came through. Battery storage. We have 10 times as much battery storage as we had 2 years ago. That showed up at critical peak times. And I'm kind of giving it to you in the order of priority. The gas units are the predominant source of power during those hours. The next dominant source is imports from outside. And then the third is batteries. So when you think about this, the transition to clean power is starting, but it's going to be a longer, it's a long road, because you're not going to replace that 60% of gas overnight. However, the 10x amount of battery storage, we had close to 3,000 megawatts of battery storage this year, and 2 years ago it was 300 megawatts. This board has approved dozens of megawatts of battery storage just for us. So there's going to be, I think we already approved about 175 megawatts. All these resources are going to come online with all the other load serving entities in the state. Our staff did a yeoman's job in coming together. Even though we started sending out flex alerts on Friday, the peak was on Tuesday. September 6th is when we came closest to losing power. But right from Sunday, staff was in the office essentially through virtual meetings, etc., reaching out to our large customers, reaching out to our residential customers, our C&I customers, and also specific emails to our medical baseline customers. And we actually broke protocol to inform our existing plans. We were making some of this up as we were going, to make sure that our customers had enough warning to get things in place. I wanted to thank all of you who pushed out this information using social media. Also, I'm not going to name everyone, but many of our municipal agencies did go above and beyond by firing up some of their backup generation. Our large customers also fired up their backup generation. They were amazingly helpful. Almost 60 megawatts of generation was called on backup generation on one particular day. So really good effort. However, it's not the way we want to run the system all the time. You have hot air. This is we want to be planning for a resilient system of multiple heat days. We are on our way to doing that with everything we are doing by the transition to clean energy. And that's going to continue. We're going to continue to invest in this. I am going to recognize several people here on staff. Justin Zagunis, Zoe Elizabeth, Nipur Haramat, Tony Yulo, Monica Padilla, Zachary Liss, Benna Chang, Caleb Pippin, Peyton Fox, Peter Mustasich, Beth Trenchard, Raul and Leslie, newest employees. They all pitched in weekends, evenings. Thank you very much for all those efforts in keeping the lights on. So, yeah.
Thank you all. Those of us on this board know what it took to keep this organization going and the incredible success for our customers. So thank you very much to those that specifically helped this last situation, but all of our staff for making it possible for the staff to make work through this situation. So thank you very, very much, and job well done.
Thank you, Chair and Board. I'll just emphasize that this transition to a clean energy system, we can plan it, but we know this is a giant transformation that we're making. The reality of climate change, by just looking at this heat storm, we've never had something like this ever in California. And so the road to a cleaner grid is not necessarily a straight line and a smooth straight line. It's a trending line, and we are on that path to get there. So I feel very optimistic about the transformation to a clean grid, but there are lots of lessons also from operational issues to policy issues that we really need to continue to engage in. And I think the governor, right from the governor's level, who personally talked to many of us in the industry on Friday evening, both thanking us and also really encouraging us to basically think through, we can't have this happen again and again. So with that, I'm going to, this is the end of my report, Chair Gibbons. I'll hand it back to you.
Thank you very much. Much excitement and success. We will now move on to regular calendar item number 3. It's going to be an update on the strategic plan and the adoption of the fiscal year 23 Silicon Valley Clean Energy Strategic Focus Area. This is an action item for the board, and our CEO will also make this presentation.
Chair, we do have a hand raised from Director Martinez-Beltran.
Thank you. Yes, Director Martinez-Beltran, please.
Thank you, Chair. And I want to thank our Theo for his report. It was an incredibly difficult week. And I just wanted, while we know it wasn't a system-wide blackout, I mean, there were significant impacts. And I know in Morgan Hill, I don't know if everyone saw, but we were hit especially hard. And we had lots of infrastructure failing on us. And we just, I'm wondering if others had the same problem that we experienced in Morgan Hill, and hoping that maybe we could work as a group together to talk with the CPUC while we're providing the energy. The infrastructure just was really outdated. And we've got to make sure that we get that up to par, because we can't have this continue to happen for us. So I guess I'm looking to see, can anybody else, tell me, maybe we could work in tandem in talking with the CPUC and kind of, double down on our efforts with that.
So I'm going to suggest that our CEO is looking into that entire situation and looking to figure out how we should move forward when this situation happens, and the infrastructure and recognition of where those infrastructure failures occurred. There were some here at Valley Medical, for example. So they happened all around. I don't think quite as severe as what you suffered in Morgan Hill. So I'm thinking that we should have a follow-up discussion, perhaps starting at the executive board level and hearing from the CEO.
I think that's fantastic.
If I may suggest, I will follow up with the executive committee.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for those comments and concerns. And if there are no other raised hands, Thank you, Andrea. We will now move to item number 3.
Sorry, it's me. Finding it a little difficult to share. Just hold on for one sec. Andrea, I'm unable to share one window, so you're going to have to run the PowerPoint for me, please. I'm only able to share my entire screen.
Okay, will do.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Chair Gibbons, members of the board. Go to the next slide. You've seen this before. This is programmatic, our strategic plan and work plan and budget. They all work together, and the CEO evaluation. Today, I'm going to ask you for approval of the strategic focus areas, and the next item is going to be Amrit, who will request budget approval. Next slide. We've talked to you over the months about our strategic plan and our strategic focus areas. We have got the green light from you to keep our mission and measure the same. Next. This is a graphic of how our work plan works with our strategic plan. On the left-hand side is a picture of our glossy document, which is also beautifully done on our website, which has our work plan. And it has 21 goals and 75 measures. It goes into quite a bit of detail. It's too much for us as a board to actually work on that. So what we do is we look at the right side of this chart. We look at focus areas that are current for us. What are the areas in the work plan that the board and CEO want to make sure that we prioritize? And this helps us prioritize and develop the work plan too. Over the last several years, as we've done this, note that priority areas that you've already greenlighted, I don't bring it back to you every single year. For example, business process optimization. In today's consent calendar, you approved a 5-year contract with Adapt2, which had to do with business process optimization. That was one of the focus areas in the last 2 years, and it is a 5-year program. So that becomes an in-flight program. Next. So the mission, there's no change. Next. The goals and measures, we've undertaken discussion on that, so we kind of know what we need to update. We are also going to enhance this document by adding a customer lens to it, and I've updated the board on that. We'll present it you'll see this document at the October meeting. Next. So today we're focusing on these focus areas again. And though we've discussed it in previous meetings, I have made a change because of new information, and that has to do with the Inflation Reduction Act. Next slide. So this gets to the strategic focus areas. It's very useful, I believe, for the board and CEO to establish priorities. At the end of the day, SVCE has a work plan. We are working on a tremendous breadth and depth of issues, but this is essentially a way of putting a spotlight on a few issues. They don't replace the work plan and goals. It just enhances it. Next. So the 5 focus areas that I talked to you about at the last meeting, 2 of those focus areas dealt with employees. One is having to do with employee culture, and the other was to increase our bandwidth by hiring more employees. Well, since then, we've had the Inflation Reduction Act, so I've combined the 2 employee-related focus areas into one and added the Inflation Reduction Act as a new focus area. Next. So this is what they look like. I've labeled them. 4 of the ones in blue you've seen before. The one in green is new. We shared this with the executive committee, and they made some changes that I'll talk to you about. Next. So focusing on the center of this chart, the Inflation Reduction Act, though I called it Inflation Reduction Act, The sentence here actually explains it a little more detail, and the appendix has more information on this. And of course, our work plan gets into more detail, so it's kind of a layered approach here. So essentially, the Inflation Reduction Act is around accelerating deployment of our decarbonization strategies and goals, evaluate and capitalize on the act itself. And the exec committee reminded us, and we add the California state budget climate funds to adding that. When you get into the detail of this one, I've also added that we will be evaluating, looking at our relationship with organized labor and the use of different agreements with them in our utility scale programs and also our decarbonization programs. So going from left to right, I'm not really going to spend much time on this because everything in blue you have seen before and given us thumbs up on. But essentially, getting our portfolio on the left hand 24/7 clean energy, we're still going to be 100% clean. That's a given. But getting to more approaching 24/7, taking a step in that direction is what we're going to explore. Expanding and growing our customer base just by looking at our direct access customers and seeing what we can do with them. We had the deal with Google recently that you approved, a 10-year deal with them, where we increased our load. So this is not about expanding our territory. It's incrementally expanding our load, especially with customers who share the carbon-free approach. On finance, the two things, including leveraging our balance sheet, like what we just talked about the prepay deal, and also looking at financing solutions for decarbonization programs. On the employee side, it's continuing to invest in this culture that we have. That's very good. Looking at making hybrid work and face-to-face work very well for us and increase our bandwidth by hiring new staff. At the last meeting, we made a proposal and the board actually increased our ask from 8 new employees to 10. And that's going to be a big project just to hire them and then, of course, to onboard them. Continue to be one of our focus areas. Next. So if you approve these strategic focus areas, the next time you'll see our work plan is going to be on October 12th. And it'll be presented for information only. Of course, anytime you have questions on any aspect of our work plan, please feel free to reach out to us for any explanations. Next and last slide. It's now back to you, Chair Gibbons. I'm requesting that the board approve our focus areas as presented. Thank you.
Thank you. And Andrea, could you put the focus slides up so that the board can focus on the focus slide, please? And with that, I would ask the board members, are there any questions of our CEO at this time on these 5 strategic focus areas? I see none here in the chamber, and I am now looking. I see none. There is one on our panel, and that is Director Martinez Beltran.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask if there was an idea of what, if we could define accelerate. Is there a certain goal that we want to be to that we're not at when we say accelerate deployment of currently adopted decarbonization strategies?
Yeah, it's we are accelerating the acceleration, essentially. Back in August of last year, when we had the IPCC Code Red report come out, that's when you told us, start thinking about doubling down. We need to put more money in our budget. So that's when we came out with a double down strategy. It took us a few months to talk to all of you. We went through some study sessions, got feedback from you, feedback from our stakeholder community, and develop our double down strategy. Since then, both from our financial picture and the Inflation Reduction Act, we're talking about what else can we do? Now, the focus for us is we've got to build the capacity and systems to actually make this happen. I'd be happy to get together with you on the specifics. In our double down presentation, we actually have specifics on it. And in a couple of weeks, we'll be sending you a 2-pager that you could utilize, which says how the $17 million that you allocated, how it is allocated into 5 different programs that emphasizes outreach to low income and using our socioeconomic vulnerability index also to invest in multifamily dwellings and EV infrastructure in multifamily dwellings, looking at permit streamlining. So we have specific programs.
Okay.
And we're in the process of developing implementation plans and getting the staff in place to actually do it.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. I do not see any other hands with questions from the board. Therefore, I'll open the public comment period and see if there are any comments from the public. I see no raised hands from the public on public comment. We will then return it to the board for discussion and ultimately a motion. I would just say that in the last 2 weeks, I'm sure all of us have been receiving, excuse me, innumerable numbers of programs and seminars all about the Inflation Reduction Act. And I've attended one, which was, of course, dear to my heart, which is the AIA and the USGBC did a joint conference called Today. And they are providing significant links and resources. And it brought to my mind that one of the things about double downing that we could double down on is working with other organizations that are really aggressively engaged in the Inflation Reduction Act and how it relates to the decarbonization of the built environment. So if you see any of those programs, feel free to encourage, I would encourage you to watch and attend them. Anyone else with a comment?
I'm prepared to make a motion, Chair.
Thank you. I see no other comments. Yes, please, a motion.
Okay, I will go ahead and move to approve the strategic plan and adopt FY23 SVCE strategic focus areas.
Thank you. May I have a second?
Second, Abikoga.
So we have a motion by Director Martinez Beltran and a second by Director Abikoga. With no further comment, may we have a roll call, please?
Yes, thank you. Chair Gibbons?
Aye.
Vice Chair Tyson?
Yes.
Director Larson?
Aye.
Willie?
Aye.
Flagger?
Yes.
Rennie?
Aye.
Shua?
Aye.
Ilahi?
Aye.
Martinez Beltran?
Aye.
Abikoga?
Aye.
Walia?
Aye.
Lee?
Aye.
Thank you. That motion carries unanimously with Director Hilton absent.
Thank you. Very exciting. And we'll see what happens in October. And now we are on to item number 4, which is adopt the fiscal year 2022-23 recommended operating budget and updated reserves policy. This is an action item by the board, and we have the pleasure of in person having the CFO and Director of Administrative Services, Amrit Singh.
Thank you, Chair Gibbons. Good evening, directors. It's good to be here in person in the hall chamber here. So I am going to present the budget for adoption. As you recall, we can go to the next slide, Andrea. The budget for adoption. If you recall, in August, we went through in detail, and the board at that point did not have any suggested changes. We, however, did make one slight change, very minor, which I will go over. So as I promised, I will keep this presentation short, given that we went through it in detail in August. I will recap some of the key messages and highlight the proposed budget. Next slide, please. Just the timeline and the process we went through, just a quick reminder, we started this in June with the exec committee and went to finance committee. With the adoption today, we will have the opportunity to adjust the budget as we do every year in March. As you know, there are a lot of moving pieces in the commodity business, so the numbers will change, and we will have the opportunity to revisit them in March and make the adjustments as we do every year. Okay, Andrea, next slide. So very quickly, some of the key messages that we went through in detail at the August meeting. So the first message is we're looking at a very good financial year. There are a lot of uncertainties and risks as is inherent in our business, but look from where the market is and what the numbers are, the year is looking to be a very good financial year for us. The forecast shows the PCIA for the first time going slightly negative as PG&E's tariff, it's going to be set to zero, and again, we don't lose that money, it gets trued up in the following year. And PG&E's generation rate will continue to be high, which leads to a significant increase in our revenues. Obviously, the power supply cost increases, but the increase in revenues more than offsets the power supply cost increase, leading to a healthy contribution to reserves of about $115 million that we're projecting right now. And just a quick reminder, the final rates will be adopted by PG&E, adopted by CPUC, which PG&E will file if everything goes to the planned calendar. They will make that filing in October. So in October, we'll have a better understanding of the numbers of PCIA and PG&E gen rates, and hopefully the CPUC will adopt that in December. And at that point, as I mentioned in highlight number 3, we can come back and revisit some of the key decisions like the customer discount rate. The other thing I wanted to highlight is we're updating our reserves policy, so we are asking the board to approve the updated reserve policy. If you remember, in June we went through the stress test analysis and we talked about the impact also in the August meeting. We are building reserves to be able to withstand the model stress test, so we're increasing our reserves cash holding target from 230 days to 285 days, and the upper target from 320 to 490 days. The customer discount rate, overall discount will be 3% that we're proposing when PG&E's new rates go in effect. Hopefully, if they stick to the schedule, as I mentioned, beginning in January, at that point we will provide 2% discount to all customers and 1% converted to dollar bill credits, which will amount to about $10.50 for our low-income customers. And until that, we propose to keep the current 1% discount in effect. The other key changes, as we talked and Grish mentioned as well, we're increasing our headcount by 10 new positions. A lot of them are focused in our programs area to accelerate the decarbonization programs. We are enhancing our employee benefits in a number of areas that we talked about last budget. We're also adjusting compensation for cost of living and merit. Next slide, Andrea. So here's how the numbers look. You can see a significant increase from the mid-year budget for the current fiscal year. We're looking to contribute about $115 million to our reserves if the assumptions prevail. Okay. So I'll mention in the next slide, I'll mention the minor change that we made to the budget. So CC Power cost, we had budgeted $60,000. We are upping it to $150,000, and the reason for that is the same driver, the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act. CC Power is looking at opportunities to capitalize on the IRA. They're staffing up. There are opportunities for ownership now. So the interim general manager is going from being interim to full-time, and they will be increasing staff. We don't quite expect this large of an increase, but this is erring on the conservative side. We think it's going to come in lower, and we'll have more details actually in October when the board meets, CC Power board meets. But from our budget perspective, this is a very, very minor minor adjustment. That was the only change we made, and I'll go to the next slide where I'll summarize it once again. We're looking at a very good year. There are risks in this business. We're managing those risks. We're managing them well. We're building our reserves to withstand the risks that we face. We're keeping the discount to 1% until new rates, PG&E and PCI rates go into effect. At that point, we're proposing 3%. Power supply costs increase, but again, offset by a growth in our revenues. And also, we're increasing for operating expenses. Grish mentioned the BPO that the board just approved to bring operational efficiencies, increase in staffing areas, and some of the other key strategic areas. That was the highlight of the budget. On the next slide, I think we were asking, for the approval, and obviously I'll take any questions.
Thank you. And Andrea, would you leave the previous slide up for the board? Excellent summary. And again, I don't want to minimize the fact that staff has done an excellent job. And certainly, Amrit, we appreciate the fact that we've done these stress tests. And this last 9 days of heat wave shows that we needed to do that, and we are well prepared and will be going down in the future. So thank you for all of this work and setting us up to be so successful in the next year's budget outlook. Are there any questions on the overall financial budget recommendation for 2022-23? I see none in the room here. I will go to the board in Zoom. I see no raised hands with questions. We will then move to the portion of the meeting for public comment. Are there any members of the public wishing to comment on this budget? I see none in the room and none on Zoom. We will return to the board now for discussion and/or a motion.
Chair, I'm ready to make a motion.
Thank you.
Okay, I would like to move to adopt the FY 2022-23 recommended operating budget and updated reserves policy, please.
Thank you. And I saw Director Abikoga's hand raised.
Oh, yes, Chair. I'll second the motion. I just want to thank staff for all of their hard work. This is always like there's, some element of surprise, not really, risk that we have to take, but I appreciate the balanced approach and appreciate the hard work that has been put into the budget so that we can move in a prudent fashion forward. Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, we have a motion by Director Director Martinez-Bertrand, and a second by Director Abikoga. May we have a roll call, please?
Yes, thank you. Chair Gibbons?
Aye.
Vice Chair Tyson?
Yes.
Director Larson?
Aye.
Willie?
Aye.
Flagger?
Yes.
Rennie?
Aye.
Shua?
Aye.
Elahi?
Aye.
Martinez-Beltran?
Aye.
Abekoga?
Aye.
Walia?
Aye.
Lee?
Aye.
Thank you. That motion carries unanimously with Director Hilton absent.
Again, thank you to staff and to the board for your attention on this important issue. We will now move forward to item number 5, which is also an action item. This is to authorize the Chief Executive Officer to execute necessary agreements for a resource adequacy resource from AES Clean Energy Development, LLC. And the staff presentation will be Charles Grinstead, our Senior Manager of Power Resources. So Charles, welcome.
Great, thank you. Good evening, board members. As mentioned, my name is Charles Grinstead, Senior Manager of Power Resources. Tonight we're asking for the approval of the Midterm Reliability Baldy Mesa Resource Adequacy Agreement. Next slide, please. And so before we begin tonight's agenda item, I'd like to take a minute to discuss why we're asking for your approval for this project. This project is being procured as part of a CPUC procurement requirement, referred to as a midterm reliability order. The order attempts to help mitigate reliability issues for the next few years as we plan for such resource retirements as Diablo Canyon Nuclear Power Plant and several natural gas ones through cooling resources and transition to a zero carbon fleet of resources. For this particular requirement, contracts must be brought on between calendar years 2023 through 2026 and have a minimum term of 10 years. And so here we are asking to delegate authority for the CEO to execute this contract with the following parameters. And so this contract is a 10-year resource adequacy agreement with expected delivery from June 1st, 2023 through May 31st, 2033. It has up to 75 megawatts of lithium ion battery, which is incremental capacity. And the total contract amount is not to exceed $81.5 million. Next slide, please. As I mentioned previously, the midterm reliability order is a requirement that all CPUC jurisdictional entities must comply to, and collectively the state will bring about 11,500 megawatts of additional capacity by 2026. This order was adopted by the CPUC on June 24th, 2021. As I previously mentioned, some of these objectives of the order are also to replace existing resources. The mandate identifies 4 distinct capacity groups, which are long duration storage, so 8-hour duration lithium ion batteries, firm clean resources or geothermal, paired energy producing capacity, solar plus storage, and zero emitting peak resources, so 4-hour duration storage. The next slide, please. And so here in this chart, we can see SVC's progress in meeting these requirements. I also note that several projects the board has previously executed are represented in this chart. As you can see, SVCEA has sourced new geothermal and long duration storage resources and is on track for compliance requirements number 3 and number 4. And so our remaining focus is to fulfill number 1 and number 2 requirements with additional procurement for bridge products. Next slide, please. And so in this slide, I'm noting as a part of this effort, that SVC, along with several other CCAs, engaged the market with a competitive solicitation process, which yielded over 38 other projects. Ultimately, we selected Baldy Mesa in March 2022 because of its near-term operation date, price, and experience working with AES. Next slide, please. So here are a few contract details for Baldy Mesa, just noting that this contract is a fixed price, dollars per kW month product. It's located in San Bernardino, California, and has an expected commercial operation date of June 2023. Next slide, please. Again, Baldy Mesa is procured for MTR, but I wanted to highlight some alternatives and other consequences for noncompliance. First, if we don't make this procurement, IOUs could be tasked with backstopping capacity on our behalf and then essentially shifting those costs to our customers. Penalties can also be assessed at a rate set by the CPUC, and also we could be faced with deregistration. So lastly, other alternatives to this contract would be to launch another solicitation and engage the market for other projects. And so we have an incentive here to do our own procurement. We would rather not have the IOUs backstop and potentially face penalties and lose our ability to purchase resources on our behalf. Next slide, please. So I also want to just highlight some of our current procurement efforts. We have issued a new joint solicitation with several other CCAs with a focus on the 2024 tranche. I also want to note that we are monitoring Diablo Canyon's extension as this may impact the procurement order's deadlines. We are also working hard at preserving our current executed PPAs that provide MTR value. And lastly, we are reviewing the recent administrative law judge ruling that attempts at addressing the requirements of the order and acknowledges supply chain issues. Next slide. And so just again, we're requesting that you delegate authority for a CEO to execute the Baldy Mesa RA only agreement with the following parameters: the 10-year contract RA only with expected delivery from June 1st, 2023 through May 31st, 2033, has a contract volume of up to 75 megawatts of lithium ion battery, which is incremental capacity, and we're not to exceed a contract amount of $81.5 million. That concludes my presentation. I'm available to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Charles. That was a nice sequential summary of what we're doing and why we're doing it. And I appreciated the presentation on what the risks were if we didn't do this particular contract. So thank you for that information. We have a question from Director Lee.
Yes, thank you. A great presentation. My question is actually relating to the extension of Diablo Canyon. If Diablo Canyon is expected, as most recently that they might be extended 5 or even 10 years, how would that affect our purchase? Was this like an option so that if we were to approve it now, that we could delay the purchase and not obligate us to purchase this when Diablo Canyon is still operating?
Yeah, thanks for the question. So we are monitoring any conversations that the CPUC is having around Diablo Canyon's extension. Right now, we don't have any clear direction in terms of the procurement or timelines and the deadlines. And so, all we can do now is proceed with our current procurement and just wait and see what happens with the CPUC. Though we are staging our contracts and our solicitations to accommodate for that recent ruling.
So that in our contract, basically, my question is that you have it built in so that if that extension were to take place, then we will not be stuck purchasing something that we don't need. That's my only question. Thank you.
Yeah, unfortunately, we can't write those kind of condition precedents into individual contracts. That's a difficult contracting item. We do have the ability to stage our procurement through the order. So, we can look to make economical purchases that benefit our portfolio while also meeting the requirement. And this contract would help facilitate that. So not all of these contracts are just to procure to the order. They also have an economic benefit.
And that's what I thought was most important to understand. It's done for the midterm reliability, but it also provides additional assets to our portfolio.
Chair?
Yes.
That's a great question, Director Lee, and this is what we are operating with an uncertainty. We have to act in spite of uncertainty. I'm going to add one more recent uncertainty, and that's this heat wave that just occurred last week. We tend to plan our electric system in a 1 in 2 case. At most a 1 in 5 case. What we are seeing with climate change, this last heat wave was a 1 in 20 event. I would expect that the CPUC and the California Independent System Operator will be re-looking at the margins that we have in our electric system to manage for these longer and more intense heat waves. So your question's a good one, where the continuation of Diablo may have relaxed these requirements if nothing else had changed. But I think just the experience of last week, I fully expect those to change. However, I'm speculating at this point. We have to make a decision given our existence. Thank you.
Thank you, Ganesh. Through the chair, I just want to say that I've absolutely no issues of acquiring more capacity. And I just want to make sure that if we were to do so, that we will not be stuck paying for something that we don't use, because my guess is that we will use more anyways. Number one. Number two is the fact that who knows, if we have excess, we could probably sell and make some money off of it, given how inflation is these days with energy costs. So I don't see having too much capacity is a bad thing. I just want to make sure that was clear. Thank you.
Thank you.
As always, great questions. Do we have any others from our board? Seeing none, I will close the questions and move to public comment. Are there any members of the public wishing to speak on or ask on this item? I have one hand raised, and it is by Mr. Carney. Welcome.
Thanks very much. I have a question about demand response as a way to balance consumption of electricity with generation during heat waves as well as at other times, and also about critical peak pricing, which is a rate option that apparently PG&E has had for a number of years, where a customer agrees that on 10 specific days, up to 10 days of the year, they can be asked to pay a very large price per kilowatt hour, and in exchange for that, on the other 355 days of the year, they get a discount. When SVCE was first formed, I remember a member of the public coming to a board meeting and saying, gee, SVCE doesn't offer critical peak pricing, and he liked that offering from PG&E and was disappointed that SVCE couldn't provide it. So I wonder if the CEO could comment on the potential for SVCE offering a critical peak pricing rate plan, and also whether or not the state may begin to accept demand reduction through Ohm Connect and similar programs as being equally valid to building new generation.
Director Balachandran.
Thank you, Chair Gibbons. I'd be happy to talk to Bruce offline too, but we'll definitely consider this. Demand response, it did show up, but nothing compared to the fossil fuel fleet, essentially. And imports, it really is, from a strategic standpoint, something we really want to do. And we have, actually, Justin is leading up a program on virtual power plants to get that ready for the next summer period. And it's a cross-department effort because it's the supply side, decarbonization side, and the customer side. So we actually were going to meet on the Wednesday of that heat wave week. We postponed the meeting. So pricing is also a challenge. I think the Ohm Connect is a great idea. I think auto DR, automatic demand response, is the way to go. You've got to take it out of the customer's hands, really. Having every customer take actions one at a time. The only reason it worked this time was when the Amber Alert was done. And this was the one time in California's history it was used for energy. You can't use that more than once every few years. So, great question. It's part of our strategic goals, and yeah, it's going to take us some time, but it's we'll consider those programs, pricing and Ohm Connect.
Thank you for that question, and look forward to where it goes in the future. And I see no other questions from the Zoom participants or in the audience. And with that, we'll bring it back to discussion and motion from the board.
I'm so moved. This is Director Lee.
Second.
Sorry.
Second, Flagger.
Thank you. A motion by Director Lee and a second by Director Flagor. May we have a roll call, please?
Yes, thank you. Chair Gibbons?
Aye.
Vice Chair Tyson?
Yes.
Director Willie?
Yes.
Larson?
Aye.
Flagger?
Yes.
Rennie?
Aye.
Chua?
Aye.
Elahi? I believe that was an aye. Elahi. Thank you. Martinez Beltran?
Aye.
Abe Koga?
Aye.
Walia?
Aye.
Lee?
Aye.
Thank you. That motion carries unanimously with Director Hilton absent.
Thank you. Thank you, Charles and staff, for putting that information out for us to be able to understand and vote on. Thank you. We have 2 items remaining on the agenda. Both of these are updates. Item 6 is Integrated Resource Plan Status Update. And Maren Wenzel is our Senior Manager of Energy Policy and Regulatory Analysis. And Maren, you're going to show up somewhere. There you are.
All right, great. Thank you, Chair Gibbons. I'm just going to share my screen here quickly. I believe you're all able to see that. So yeah, good evening. I'm going to be speaking to you today a little bit about the Integrated Resource Plan, and I want to talk both about the proceeding itself as well as SVCE's IRP that we're going to be filing this coming November. So first, I wanted to give a little bit of background on the proceeding and really how it works. And I think it's important to think of the Integrated Resource Plan as the CPUC's sort of umbrella proceeding. So it's the place where the CPUC tries to get a sense of what the needs for the entire California energy system is in order to meet all of our various policy goals and state needs. And so the way this works at a very high level is that every 2 years, LSEs submit their IRPs. And this is the 3rd time that LSEs have done this. So SVCE staff has come to this board both in 2018 and 2020 to seek approval for previous IRPs that were filed. And really what the IRP itself is an LSE puts together a series of portfolios where they show how they're going to meet their resource adequacy, greenhouse gas emissions targets, and also their RPS goals. And in the past, we've always done these looks out to 2030, and this is the first time that we're now going to be looking all the way out to 2035. So once individual LSEs submit these IRPs, the CPUC takes them and they stitch them together into what they call a preferred system plan. And they then run that preferred system plan through a series of models to check that we're meeting all of those state policy goals. And so those are things like checking for reliability and also that we're meeting our GHG reduction goals. One of the important things to sort of keep in mind about the IRP is that, as Charles sort of just spoke to in his presentation, this tends to be a very impactful proceeding because it's one of the main places through which the CPUC orders procurement. So that MTR order, that 11.5 gigawatts, was ordered through this IRP proceeding. And in the previous 2 cycles, we've seen almost 15 gigawatts of new net qualifying capacity ordered. I wanted to step back a little bit further and really put the IRP in the context of the Greater California energy goals. So we know that the state itself has very aggressive climate targets. This graphic is actually already likely out of date because with AB 1279, we're actually going to try to achieve something even more ambitious than this. But nonetheless, what we are really doing is we're taking the state's overall goals, and CARB is asking the CPUC to look at how the electricity sector meets its share of that. So I'll be talking throughout this presentation a little bit about sort of million metric ton targets, and I wanted to give a little context for the background on that. So back in 2017, the California Air Resources Board set a planning range of 30 to 50 million metric tons for the electricity sector by 2030. And what we've seen in the IRP since it started in 2018 is a gradual push to get more aggressive in that electric sector range. So in the 2018 cycle, we had a 46 million metric ton target. Last cycle, we were aiming for a 38 million metric ton target. And this cycle, we're looking at both 38 and 30 million metric ton targets. I noted a few minutes ago that at the end of the cycle, or at the conclusion, we try to put together a preferred system plan. But each cycle also starts with what we call a reference system plan. And ideally, the preferred system plan from the previous cycle informs the reference system plan from the next cycle. But I wanted to call out a few things about the current reference system plan for your reference when we look at some of our results later. So first of all, one of the big key takeaways here is just the massive amount of capacity that the CPUC believes we need to bring online. So depending upon the GHG target, they expect that the system needs anywhere from 34 to 46 gigawatts of new capacity. I also want to quickly point out where they believe that capacity is going to come from. So they believe there's going to be a need for a significant amount of batteries, which is what you see in the purple graphics here, or sorry, the purple part of these columns here. A significant amount of solar, and so that's the sort of dark yellow, and then a variety of different types of wind technologies, which show up in those various shades of blue. So that's offshore wind, out-of-state wind, and additional new in-state California wind. I'll also point out that there's a little bit of geothermal added here in red, but those are sort of the three big ones, is the wind, solar, and batteries. So before I jump into our results and exactly what we're thinking about filing, I wanted to go over just very quickly what the filing requirements are. So this filing for SVC will be due November 1st. There are three primary deliverables that we're going to provide to the CPUC on that date. First of all, we'll file a narrative. And in that narrative, we're going to discuss how we did our modeling, what our portfolio results were, and potential barriers to actually bringing those portfolios online. We also have an opportunity in the narrative to talk about all the work that our programs teams and customer service teams are doing to support our customers and our communities. The other two portions that we file with the IRP are really Excel workbooks that are used for compliance purposes, but they're nonetheless very important. So one of them is called a resource data template. And so for each portfolio we file, we'll submit a resource data template where we show every resource we believe we'll have under contract for that portfolio. The second thing we'll file is called a Clean System Power Tool. That's essentially the CPUC's GHG calculator. So one other key difference between this filing and previous filings was in the past, LSCs were required to submit portfolios that met both planning targets. So in general, there's been two different GHG scenarios that have been explored in a given year. And so SVC last time had to file a 46 and a 38 million metric ton target, even though our intent was always to aim for the 38 million metric ton scenario. This time the CPUC has come back and said, you don't need to do that. If you want to, you can just file portfolios that exceed the lower target. And so that's what we're currently on a trajectory to do. The last thing I'll say is just sort of where we are before I give an update on any results. And that's that we are currently developing as much of the narrative as we can without having total final portfolios complete. And then simultaneously, we're working on developing those portfolios and getting those modeling results ready. I'm going to speak next about our draft results and sort of our key themes of our narratives, but I did want to pause here and see if there's any questions on the IRP proceeding itself. I don't see any hands, so I'm going to go ahead and continue, and we can obviously take questions at the end as well. So before I show the portfolios that we're considering, I wanted to talk at a high level about how we think about our portfolio development. And so for each portfolio that we create, I think there's three really core things that we need to balance. And those are sort of what I think of as the core elements of system planning. So we want any portfolio that we put forward to balance reliable, clean, and affordable. We also need to make sure that any portfolio reasonably balances risks, both financial and regulatory. And then finally, I think we need to acknowledge that the IRP itself is really a compliance proceeding, right? So there are a number of assumptions and inputs and compliance tools like the CSP that are dictated to us by the CPUC. And so some of the assumptions that go into this IRP are not necessarily SVC's internal view, but rather what we have to provide to the CPUC just because of the nature of the order. So currently, SVC is in the process of developing several potential conforming portfolios, which we might be filing. We are looking at a 75% RPS portfolio by 2030, and we hold to that 75% thereafter. a scenario where we have 100% RPS by 2030, which is quite aggressive, and a 100% RPS by 2035, so sort of a balance between those two options. I'll also note that we're actively working on creating a scenario where we have a 60% RPS by 2030. And that's really due to sort of a renewed sense of concern around making the IRPs enforceable, which I'll talk about in just a moment. In addition to all the portfolios that we're planning to file, there's also a number of sensitivity runs that we're hoping to do. And these are not going to be formally filed, so there won't be an RDT and a CSP which accompany them, but we will speak to how the results would potentially impact our portfolio, and they'll be used to help inform specific sections of the narratives. So I'll talk about those a little bit more, but just as a preview, we're looking at a high electrification scenario, a scenario where we enforce some offshore wind into our portfolio, and potentially a scenario where we explore the impact of the Diablo Canyon power plant extension. All of the portfolios that we're looking at include SVC's existing portfolio, so both resources already online and in development. They include our PG&E allocations, including VAMO, and they also include additional short-term RA that we believe we can procure on the market. All of these conforming plants also use that IRP-assigned IPER forecast. So that's one of those input assumptions where the CPUC tells us exactly what to do and we don't have a lot of leeway. And in that IPER forecast, we see our load increase by about 11% by 2035, and our peak increase by about 12% by that same year. And finally, I want to emphasize that all of these scenarios, SVC remains carbon-free on an annual basis. The differences here are really how we meet those needs. So are we using just RPS resources like wind and solar, or are we also continuing to use the broader category of GHG-free resources, which includes hydro and nuclear power? So I want to emphasize that the results that we're showing this evening are very much preliminary and they will be changing, but we thought it would be useful to give you a sense directionally of where we think these portfolios are headed. So a couple of common themes that I'll point out. First, I'll explain the table a little bit. So the top row is what we currently expect to have on the grid on a nameplate basis by 2030. And then each row shows the total capacity that we'd have under this new scenario. So we consistently see that we would add quite a bit of batteries, going from 175 megawatts to 300 megawatts. Those batteries will, in all instances, be paired with solar, so they'll be hybrid projects. And we also need quite a bit of new capacity to fill our energy needs, especially in those cases where we are going to 100% RPS, because in those scenarios, we would no longer be using our PG&E hydro allocation, and we'd need to fill that energy position with RPS resources. So once again, I don't want to get too caught up in the numbers here because they will change, but just wanted to point out that as a general trend, what we're seeing is we aren't going to need new capacity until the late 2020s. And when we do start building, it's a mix that seems pretty familiar to what we saw in the reference system plan, right? We're building wind and we're building hybrid resources. If you get to a 100% scenario, you have a more aggressive build because once again, you're no longer using that hydro allocation. And so that is likely going to be a more costly portfolio. And we also see that we add a little bit of geothermal in these scenarios as well. And then finally, when you get to very aggressive scenarios like 100% RPS by 2030, you need quite a bit of build and you need it pretty rapidly. So here we're building 430 megawatts of wind by 2028. Not necessarily cost effective, not necessarily a reasonable thing to get done, but I think an interesting look at how feasible that potentially is. And once again, we're not using our hydro allocation here from PG&E, so that's sort of an additional cost that we might need to think about. So with that, I wanted to take just a moment at the end here to talk about some of the key themes that I think we need to capture in our narrative. So IRP staff has, I think for the last several cycles, indicated that they would like to make the IRP more of an enforceable plan, right? In general, LSEs think of this truly as a planning process, as a sort of way of getting guidance on where we think our portfolio is headed. But what IRP staff has indicated, I think for a while, but they really have sort of brought this to light again in a ALJ ruling that we got just last week, implying that they might even make the 2022 IRP enforceable, that they do want to make these plans enforceable. And what I mean when I say that is there's a risk that if we put 100 megawatts of wind in our portfolio in 2030, that the CPUC is actually going to hold us to that. And so they'll expect that we bring those resources online. And if we fail to do so, we could be penalized. That's not necessarily set in stone, but they are indicating that. And I think we need to think about that as we develop our portfolios and exactly what we want to put out there. So in addition to that, I think there's some sort of defensive arguments that we want to make to help create a rationale why that enforceability is difficult for us. And the sort of core theme here is that the electricity sector is rapidly evolving, as are the individual needs of all LSEs. And so we need flexibility in our planning process over time. And there's a few sort of big ticket items that we can use to really speak to that. One is to highlight that these portfolios are illustrative and not ones that we can necessarily procure to, right? So our procurement is ultimately dependent on our solicitation results. If we put 100 megawatts of Wyoming wind in our portfolio, but nobody bids any in, there's not really a lot we can do about that. Second of all, I think we really need to highlight how changes to policy and procurement orders impact our needs. So that's why we're doing that offshore wind sensitivity. So we can say, if you did an offshore wind order, it would impact our portfolio, and we would no longer need all of those resources that we showed previously. Similarly, if you have a big policy change like the extension of Diablo Canyon, which is going to really, I think, have a meaningful impact on system-wide GHG emissions, we need to be able to show how that would potentially impact our portfolio as well. So with that, I'll just close by talking a little bit about next steps. So we are going to come back to the board for the next meeting on October 12th, and we'll be seeking approval of our 2022 IRP filing. So that will be approval of the portfolios that we're hoping to submit, including which one will be our preferred portfolio, because we do have to select one as the one we believe we're most likely to pursue. We will also seek approval on some of the key messages that we're going to be putting into the narrative. And then finally, and this one is optional, but if we were to put forward a preferred scenario that had a more aggressive RPS target than the board has currently adopted, I think it's worth discussing whether or not we should adopt that as the official board target. And so with that, I will pause and see if there's any questions or comments. Thank you.
I think we all need to pause after listening. Excellent presentation, and those of us who have been through this IRP several times followed a lot of what you had to say, and I would like to emphasize that towards the end you started to mention about this discussion of is it a plan or are we going to be forced to do it in reality? That is a big deal that's been going on for quite a while and seems to be becoming more likely than not. So the decisions that staff, the research, the examples, and the decisions that staff make and recommendations to the board are significant. So I thank you very much for taking us through all the steps and components that the IRP requires. So with that, I've given everyone a few moments to think about questions. I'm looking for questions. I see none in the room, and I will check on Zoom. Oops. I don't see anyone on Zoom raising their hand with questions. I will now move to the public comment portion and go to our audience, and we have Bruce Carney. Bruce, yes.
Hi, Maureen. Thanks very much for a very good presentation. Just before I joined tonight's meeting, I was skimming through some slides that PCE's board will be looking at a retreat next week. As you know, PCE has advocated for getting to 100% carbon-free on a 24/7 basis within 5 years. But the slides that were made available recently basically say that's not feasible. And one of the things the slides point out is that PCE's rates, which are very similar to PG&E's rates, are so much higher than SMUD's rates that it makes electrification less attractive in PCE territory than in SMUD territory. In SMUD, if you get off gas and onto electricity, you can save quite a bit of money, even though that change is not inherently cheap. So my question is, with respect to the IRP, do you have to file information about the anticipated prices over the next 8 or 13 years? And if you don't have to file anticipated prices with the state, can you share them with the board in your update next month so that they can get some sense of whether or not we'll be seeing an even more rapid escalation in electricity prices than we have historically seen? And perhaps someone in the staff should talk about how that impacts the viability of electrification programs that SVCE might offer.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point and great question. So in the IRP itself, CCAs are not obligated to explicitly discuss their rates or their rate forecasts. The IOUs do have to provide a rate forecast based on their portfolios. We do have an obligation to talk about the associated costs of these portfolios. So we will have that in the narrative and should be able to present some on that when we come back next month. But I do think it's a very good point and question on how to balance these increasing costs with the need for electrification. And I know it's one that a lot of people are thinking about in the broader planning community. At SVCE, I believe there's been a push to make sure that we're monitoring not just electricity rates, but also gas rates so that we can create a compelling argument for why we ought to be supporting electrification. But very good question. I guess the one other thing I might add to that is, and I'm not sure this is fully captured in the IRP process because of how we have very specific sort of tools that we have to use, but a lot of the value of electrification is about how you time that electrification. So if we can electrify without increasing our peak demand, we can do it in a much more affordable way. So I think that's one thing that we're thinking about a lot here at SVCE.
Thank you. I will now bring the discussion back to the board and Director Rennie.
I didn't know whether we could ask questions of the commenters or not. I wanted to ask Mr. Carney a question, but I'll skip it.
Okay. So for discussion, I think, can we go back to one of your slides where I think you had a question and you were showing 3 scenarios, 75% by 2030. Oops, next back, try 11. Yeah, try that one. Okay, as I understood it, we can choose in our submittal one of these 3 scenarios that you have here. And I don't know if anyone has any thoughts on that. It seemed to me, and I think this is important to understand, and tell me if I'm wrong, that in some ways we want to hedge our bets because we don't know how much we're going to be held accountable for. So if we did the 100% RPS by 2030 and then did a preferred portfolio for that, that's kind of the best of the worlds we might run across. I'm asking.
So yeah, I guess I'd make 2 points there. First of all, we are trying to build a 60% RPS by 2030 case. And that's really in part in light because of this recent ruling that we got from CPUC staff. So we will have that as a potential fourth option, hopefully by the time we come back in October.
And
I think you're right to...
Sorry, 60% by 2030?
Yeah, it'll be a 60% RPS, so consistent with current board policy. And I think one potential rationale for using that case as our preferred scenario is, as you sort of hinted at, is it still provides us options, right? We can go out and say, you know, we believe we can get to 60%, so that's what we want to say as our preferred portfolio, but it doesn't close any doors. It still allows us to go above and beyond that. So that's one potential route to take. I do think the 100% RPS by 2030 case is probably the most aggressive and potentially not actually feasible to build. So, and then the final thing I'll say, we have to select one of these as our preferred scenario, but we can actually file multiple scenarios and really speak to the differences and why we selected the preferred scenario over one of the other ones that we filed.
Okay. That was very helpful. Thank you. So do you need direction from the board, or is it what the staff is going to come back with in October?
I will defer to Girish here a little bit, but I think if anyone has any comments or thoughts now, we're certainly happy to hear them and keep them in mind as we develop these portfolios and think about sort of the risks that we need to evaluate when we're trying to come up with a proposal for the board on which one we ought to be using as our preferred scenario.
Thank you. And I'll go to Vice Chair Tyson and then Director Flygore, Renee, and Alahi.
Great, thank you, and appreciate the presentation and kind of just my reaction as I listen to this is, it's really easy to, I think, put a stake in the ground and be the most aggressive and make best headlines, but I think we have to look at this in a realistic sense, and let's do that, and let's also look at it in a long-term sense, and that we're not reacting to, say, what a kind of short-term issue is. So you look at this and say 2035, what will be the state of, say, lithium recycle by then? There's a lot of technology changing. So when I hear about having flexibility, that's appealing to me. When I hear about nimbleness, I think that's appealing to me. I think the sense I get is that we need to have lots of options. It's long-term, as I say, realistic. And then also, let's not react to, say, a short-term thing, to say, oh no, gasoline is high and electricity is low, or the other way around. That's going to change we want people to be thinking long-term as well. And I think that'll put us in the best long-term situation.
Director Flygore?
Thank you, Chair, and I agree with Vice Chair Tyson. I wasn't clear on what the ask of the board was, but I think we're getting there where they want feedback from us on the recommended approach, knowing that the CPUC will move to enforcing whatever we represent in the IRP. And so I support taking the conservative approach and giving us some flexibility and thinking long-term, similar to what the Vice Chair said. I'm curious about this process now that the PUC is indicating that it will be enforcing whatever we represent in the IRP. Is there a back and forth? So I know the due date is by November 1st, and this will come back to us for approval. But is there a draft submitted to the PUC and they review it and they push back and say, no, this is not realistic? You're being overly conservative. What does that process look like? Or whatever we submit, that's what they accept?
Yeah, very good question. I think in general, as long as what you submit met the obligations of the compliance order, so you've hit your GHG targets, you've correctly indicated all the resources in your portfolio. In general, I've never seen an instance where the CPUC has outright rejected any LSE's IRP. They will at times, or in the past, they've at least considered the total feasibility of the portfolio. So the example I'll use there is, I believe it was the last cycle, they looked at how many LSEs said they were going to add hydro to their portfolio. And they basically said, well, is there actually that much hydro, or did everyone take sort of more than their share? And when you add it all up, it equals more than what's really there. They ultimately decided that wasn't an issue, but that's the sort of thing where if we sort of radically if we all said that we were going to get a bunch of in-state wind more than exists, they could come back and say, some of you need to rethink that. But in general, I think they'll accept it as long as it meets the compliance obligations.
Great, very helpful. Thank you.
Director Rennie?
So I would agree with Director Flygar that, we want to go the more conservative route that gives us a little more flexibility. But for me, I think our mission is greenhouse gas reduction. So that's not RPS, that's carbon-free reduction. That also could mean trying to go more 24/7 carbon-free. And as Mr. Carney alluded to, another goal is to encourage more electrification. Those are, I think, the three main things we want to go towards. When I'm asked to choose between RPS, I say, well, why do I really care? Of course, we have to meet the minimum. And the only reason I might care is hydro is becoming less and less reliable because of climate change, and we don't know how much water we're going to get each year, and that's more about and so that makes it more costly. So additional RPS target may help us be more reliable, but we also know RPS tends to also increase the cost. So to me, it's more about what's the right cost medium in these RPS targets. I don't see our 100% RPS earlier getting us really anything towards our goals unless we feel like hydro is becoming so unreliable or going to become so expensive that it actually deters from our greenhouse gas reduction goal, which isn't directly tied to RPS necessarily.
Yeah, I think those are great comments. I'll just make two very quick points. One, yes, when we come back in October, hopefully we'll have a completed cost analysis for you all to consider as we look at these portfolios. The other thing we're hoping to present in October is a set of results that really show what our 24/7 carbon-free score really would be. Not that we have any particular goal to get to 24/7, but just so we can sort of evaluate, of all these portfolios, which ones seem to be doing the most good for the grid and emissions overall. So we will try to present that as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Director Elahi.
Thank you. I think that's an amazing presentation, and what you're really looking at is we're at a crossroad of technology and weather patterns, because you're trying to predict in 7 years what's going to be, where the technology is going to be and where the weather is going to be. I would suggest you guys start building a weather station or some semblance of that, so you can, because that's going to be important because things are changing so fast, and technology moves very, very quickly. So you will see a lot going on. So I think the goals are good. Stay conservative as far as what you present the state, but that doesn't mean necessarily you stay conservative yourself, because you still have to tie up all these contracts with people resources that are available. And if you push that out too far, then you might find you don't have enough resources available at the right time. So monitoring as the technology changes as they're coming up, really staying on top of that, and the weather patterns staying on top of that too, because where is the wind coming from? Where do you need to be for that? Those may be helpful. But thank you for your presentation.
Thank you. I am looking for any other discussion points. This is not an action item. This is for our information, and make sure that this is a good chance. Yes, Director Lee, you've come up with some discussion and questions?
Yes, first of all, I'd just say thank you so much for the great presentation. My only added point is I agree with previous speakers, directors' input is that whatever we submit, I certainly want to make sure that we aim high, right, to show that we really are trying to meet and beat the the goals, but at the same time, never submit something that would get us in trouble if we can meet it, right? So that's the only thing I was going to say is that, yeah, be aggressive about what we want to do, but don't put ourselves on report and we can do it later. Yeah, thank you.
Very much to your earlier question about getting something we don't need. We don't want to put ourselves in a position where we don't have some flexibility. So I think a good discussion. And I see no one else with a raised hand anywhere. All right. Thank you very much, Maren. Well done. And we will move on to the final item of the evening, which is item 7, the new construction REACH code update. And Zoe Elizabeth, our Deputy Director of Decarbonization Programs and Policies, will give us that update.
Wonderful. Good evening. I've had a deep dive on the power supply of the house and now talking about the decarbonization electrification goals. So we are thick into the REACH code season. I'm going to go through a couple of quick updates, what's coming up, but I want to also just start. Y'all are going to be busy over the next couple months with many council meetings, information centers, and votes. So thank you all for your continued investment. Your impact is really felt across the state. And of course, also thank you for your staff. Your staff at all of our jurisdictions has been working really hard. We've got many new staff members who didn't go through this last year, and the learning curve is steep, and doing a really great job. So thank you all for your efforts. Next slide, Andrea. Yep, so I'm just going to provide a quick status update, highlight upcoming actions, and if there's any questions, I'll also happy to answer those questions. Next slide. Okay, so here is where we look at the quick high-level status updates, the new activities in the last month, and the upcoming priorities. So there were a number of cities that scheduled sessions to get council direction. Some of our jurisdictions break it up into having a session where they schedule council direction and then have a first reading to vote. Some of the jurisdictions go right to the vote. And we also have several jurisdictions that are actively working on code customization. So we are drafting some of the first model ordinances that is quite exciting. You can see in the table over here that there are council sessions scheduled in every one of our jurisdictions, or in the case of Los Altos, we just had a council information session last week. And so just to note, in case it's a little small on my screen, but there's asterisks next to some of those dates. And if there's an asterisk there, it means that the next session for the council is an information session. If there's no asterisk, it means that it's the first reading. Some of these were just updated in the last 24 hours or even couple hours. So if you read your slides early, I just recommend you take another look if you want to see what's happening, because we're keeping this very up to date. And of course, SVCE staff and TRC staff were actively meeting with all member agency staff. We're also available to answer questions for board members and have pre-meetings with board members, provide any kind of packet of information that will help you make the best decision for your community. So please don't hesitate to reach out if you haven't heard from us directly. And then finally, I'll just reiterate, Girish mentioned this in his CEO's report, but we are having a virtual forum on September 29th in the evening. All council members from SVCE territory and PCE territories have been invited. It'll be a great panel, including, of course, SVCE and PCE staff, but also PG&E will be there. We'll have developers and an affordable housing developer there, as well as a commercial developer there to, answer your questions about electrification, about REACH codes, and make sure that you're, feel prepared and have all of your questions answered ahead of time. Next slide. Maybe you could close your eyes and repeat this slide. I've showed it many times now, but it's the checklist for you to check in on and just see where you are at. And I can already say all of our jurisdictions have checked off those first 5 boxes and are preparing for votes in October. So it's quite exciting. Lots of work has happened. And I think that's the last slide. There might be one more. Yeah, that's the last slide. So if there are any questions, I'm happy to take them now.
Thank you, Zoe. This is very much on the topic of all of our cities, so thank you for keeping us on task, on point here. Are there any questions? I see no questions from the board members in attendance, and I see no raised hands. Am I missing anyone? No raised hands? Everyone okay? All right. And we will now move to the public comment. Is there any member of the public who wish to comment on this item? I see no hands raised, and we will return it back to the board for any comments or discussion. This is an update. No action is required. Any thoughts, questions anywhere? Okay. All right, seeing none. Thank you, Zoe. I very much appreciate you and Tony and everyone working to help our cities get the information that the councils need to make the best decisions for our decarbonized future. So, thank you.
Thank you all.
Okay, and the final item this evening is board member announcements and direction on future agenda items. Do we have any thoughts and accomplishments? Director Abikoga.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to mention exciting news. Last night at our City Council meeting, we voted to accept a grant of about $636,000 from SVCE to build a community center resiliency hub. So we will be using this grant to build a battery storage system that will connect to our existing solar system at the community center, which is a hub for our community. Most recently, it's been used as a cooling center. In the last few years, it was used as a COVID vaccination site. Before that, a testing site. So it's definitely a community center hub, and we're very excited to be adding this battery storage system. The grant, it will pay for about half of the cost. So we had to come up with the other half. But we're able to do that, and so we're very excited to be able to enter this partnership. And I encourage other cities to also pursue these grants, which are part of the $5 million, I believe, that SVCE set aside for energy conservation and resiliency projects. So thank you, SVCE.
Congratulations to Mountain View, and I'm glad envy isn't a word in my vocabulary. And Director Chua, you always have something for us.
Yes, it's exciting news as well. Tomorrow at 9 a.m., we're launching SMART. It's a simple mobile access to reliable transit. It's a 12-month micro transit pilot program that will provide first and last transit solution in Milpitas. The pilot program is actually funded from BTA and 2016 Measure B in partnership with RightCo. The local service will be Monday to Friday from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. And the cost for adults is $2.50. For low income, youth, and disabled, it's $1. So vans will be going around Milpitas, electric vans. So it will reduce, we're hoping to reduce the gas vehicles going around Milpitas on short distance travel. So we're so excited. So we'll be up early tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. launching this thing. Yay!
Congratulations.
It's about $3 million. Yes, I think it's about $1.5 million or something like that. So we're excited about it.
Oh, well done. And you have to send us another one of your videos.
Yes, I'll do that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And Director Martinez Beltran.
Well, I want to thank Director Chua because she reminded me that we are also launching our MOGO which is rideshare. And, we're getting the money from Measure B. So thank you all through the VTA. And I'm really excited. Same type of idea as you shared, Director Chua, and it is very exciting. We have only one transit line that goes through Morgan Hill. It's right through the middle, and it only runs north and south. If you have to go east and west, that was cut a long time ago, unfortunately. And lots of people, seniors trying to get to doctor's appointments or social services, whatever it is, kids having to get back and forth. So it's $2.50 a ride. And I'm so excited for it. There's a number of stops within Morgan Hill, and it should be a great rideshare program for people to use locally. So thank you.
Congratulations. Amazing work being done by all of our cities. Thank you very, very much. Any other comments, raised hands? I think we've got that. Okay. Don't forget to have yourself and all of your colleagues attend the Breach Code presentation on the evening of September 29th. I think it's 7 to 9 p.m. Really a good education for all of our colleagues on councils. And with that, we will adjourn the evening, and thank you all very, very much for an incredibly productive and evening of hard work. Thank you.
Good night.